I'm Victoria Hayley. I'm a clinical psychologist working in the Lancashire and South Cumbria NHS Trust. More specifically, I work in an older adult service and have done for a number of years.
Hello, I'm Hayley Higson. I'm a clinical psychologist in the older adult integrated team in West Lancashire. Okay, so we're here today. We're just going to have a little bit of a chat about loss, really, grief and loss. And I suppose the reason why we're doing that today is with everything that's going on in the global pandemic. I think it's been really highlighted how much people can encounter losses. There's a lot more of that happening, unfortunately, for people. Kind of, we've said this before, Victoria, but loss doesn't just mean losing someone. That can mean losing a role or other. We'll kind of come on to that a little bit later on. So the idea of today is just to have a little bit of a talk about loss. So we're both psychologists, so we deal with this in a professional capacity, but it's also to highlight how loss is part of human.
It's just part of life.
And
I think as psychologists, but also as human beings, it's just something that we encounter day to day, isn't it?
Absolutely. Like you said, just because we're psychologists doesn't mean that we don't encounter these things. So I suppose the idea of kind of amalgamating that information from what we kind of know is in the theory and the psychological side of things, but also as human beings in our own encounters with loss.
And I think one of the things that we really thought was important is that actually as a society we don't really talk about loss too much, and I think with all the kind of the global pandemic that's been going on, it's become more of a conversation piece, hasn't it?
Absolutely.
So we just wanted to kind of share our experiences with that, really.
Yeah.
So Hayley, you've already kind of mentioned there about what loss means. We felt it was kind of important to think about what loss means, because when you hear that word, you automatically assume that somebody's lost a person or something that's kind of really kind of significant in their life. But actually, through our work and through our conversations, I think what we've realised is that loss can mean a multitude of things. So loss can mean loss of an animal, loss of a person, but it can also be loss of a role or kind of loss of a status or a purpose in life that we've had. And I think that's particularly pertinent working in older adults. We kind of see that on the kind of towards the later life section when people might have retired and they might have really kind of important jobs or had a really kind of structured life, and then they're anticipating that retirement's going to be great, and then they lose all that. They lose their friendships, they lose their connections with people.
I think that's relevant as well for people that have been furloughed or lost their jobs in the pandemic.
Absolutely, yeah.
That kind of thing is relevant to those people as well.
Yeah, and I think through our conversations we've kind of reflected about our own kind of losses at different stages in our life. So I kind of shared with you, didn't I, about when I first became a mum. And before that, I'd been so career focused. It was just all encompassing. It was just such a big part of my life. And then I became a mum, and that stopped. My work stopped. It just kind of switched off, and I became somebody's mum. And I found that really hard to kind of adjust to losing that big part of my identity, and almost became kind of two separate people. And part of my journey of adjusting to that loss was kind of integrating the two parts of me, really, and becoming that kind of whole person again.
And I think that's like the key bit, isn't it? With some models of loss and grief, they talk about how you kind of move on, incorporating that loss. So I think Freud and like old school psychologists would talk about how you have to deal and get over the loss and kind of put it in a box and not think about it. And as society, we perpetuate that. We're in quite a secular society now. There's not a big focus on religions. There's not as much talk about loss. There's not as much kind of coming together and dealing with it in that way. So I think that perpetuates that narrative, when actually what we do need to do is kind of think about our future, and while that loss is still happened, how you kind of transition and adjust to that loss.
And when we talk about like across the lifespan, so I kind of gave that example of how my career stopped and my motherhood started, and you know, people experience endings in relationships at any kind of stage in their life, really, and not just because somebody's died, but just because relationships end. You know, people transition through different kind of work lives and everything, and I think what you were saying about the kind of furlough, that really just kind of screams that how loss is that consistent theme often throughout our lifespan, really.
Absolutely. And I think about the lifespan, it makes me think about children and how actually this scenario is impacting on them, and what that might be like for school leavers, or for young people that have, you know, all the school lives, it's drummed into you about sitting your GCSEs. Your whole school career is about that end point of sitting GCSEs, and if you've not been able to do that, I just wonder how that feels. That's a loss, you know. Absolutely. Some people might think that's weird.
Yeah, I mean, some people will be like, yes, I don't have to do exams, but other people, you know, it's a big significant milestone, isn't it?
Definitely. And I think the society we're in, it's that capitalist society. We place so much emphasis on what someone does. So that kind of ties back into that retirement stuff. If you've lost your job, actually then that does massively impact your identity. So you've lost a bit of yourself, because we place so much emphasis,
so much value in what you can give and what you can give back,
how much you can produce. And consume in society. That's seen as important. So if you lose that, if you're older and retired, or if you've lost your job, then that is really, really tough.
Absolutely.